Thank you all for attending this evening's Constitutional Committee meeting on Wednesday the 12th of October at 6 o'clock, and it's 6:12. This obviously is a in-public meeting, which means obviously members of the public can attend and obviously watch it via live stream, but they can't participate. And I just need to read out some housekeeping before we begin. The meeting obviously this evening is live streamed to the public. A recording of this meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. And if I'd like to remind all members and officers, please remember to switch off your microphone when speaking and speak directly into the microphone, and switch off when finished speaking. And obviously, and the other one is make sure please that you switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent mode. And if you need to answer a call, if it's an urgent one during the meeting, please leave the chamber and return when finished. Okay, thank you for that. And if we could first begin with apologies for absence.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on next to the minutes of the meeting, the previous meeting, which was on the 14th of July 2022, and a note of thanks to Councillor Franks for chairing that in my absence, and also the Vice Chair's absence, which I'm sure you all received. And does everybody agree to the previous minutes, those who were here?
Can I?
Yeah.
Sorry. Just to say, I gave my apologies for that meeting because I had COVID, but it doesn't say it on the minutes.
Could we look into that and make sure that's been rectified? Thank you. So subject to that being added, the minutes are correct by those who were present. Okay, thank you. Moving on to section 106 of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992, so that's agenda item 3. And obviously, as we are being live streamed, this is just a reminder to members of the public that this section relates to those items of the agenda affected by section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 that are identified at the meeting, and any members so affected are reminded that he or she should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on those items. Do we have any section 106 disclosures?
None that I'm aware of, Chair. No.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 4, which is disclosures of interests, and the paragraphs are there. There's lots of them. This is basically reminding members that you must disclose both existing and the nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and any personal interest that you have in any matter to be considered at this meeting, unless the interest is a sensitive nature, in which case they will need not disclose the nature of that interest. And any member with a disclosable pecuniary interest must not further participate in any discussion of, or vote on, or take any executive steps in relation to the item of business. And a member with a personal interest, which a member of the public with knowledge of the relevant facts would reasonably regard as so significant that it is likely to prejudice the member's judgment of the public interest, must similarly not participate in any discussion or vote on or take any executive steps in relation to the item of that business. And then disclosable pecuniary interests and personal interests are defined obviously in the Council's Code of Conduct for members and co-opted members. Do we have any such disclosures of interests?
None, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5. Do we have any urgent business?
None, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 6, which is references from committees and other bodies.
None, Chair.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item 7, which is a review of the Council's constitution, and this is the report from the monitoring officer. Mr. Turner?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very glad that we're very near, I hope, to the end of what's been quite a long process. It's taken us quite some time to get to this point. But I think we are now within sight of the finishing line. The purpose of my report tonight is to update you on the progress that's been made in relation to finalising the revised constitution documents which were circulated in the agenda pack since the last meeting that you held in July. At that meeting, the constitutional documents were substantially complete, as we thought. apart from financial regulations and protocols and conventions. Those documents have since been completed and are included in the pack. With regard to the financial regulations, there has been no material change from the current version, but what we have done is to remove all of the appendices, and we will include them elsewhere on the Council's website as documents referred to in the Constitution but not forming part of the Constitution itself. The appendices simply expand on items that are already covered in the financial regulations themselves at a level of detail which is not necessary for something that is intended to deal with rules and regulations. That has helped us to reduce the size of the Constitution, which was one of our objectives, by about 60 pages. The protocols and conventions have been updated to reflect current practice, particularly in relation to the protocol on scrutiny. The published version dates from 2002, and those of you who were members of that at that time will recall that the approach to scrutiny was very different to that of today. So that's been revised to reflect current practice rather than historical practices. We've also added in the protocol on advising ward members of particular matters of interest, which was approved by the Council in 2021. That's now been incorporated. And we've also included a protocol relating to the call-in to Development Management Committee, which links to one of the proposed changes to the scheme of delegation that is set out in the report. Since July, we have consulted with the regulatory committees that have specific ownership of certain parts of the Constitution. In relation to Development Management Committee in particular, we have discussed with them the right to speak scheme and the scheme of delegation to the head of planning, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. In relation to the protocol for member officer relations, we have consulted with Standards Committee, and the documents that are included in the pack are consistent with the wishes of those committees, except we will be discussing this evening a particular point that was raised at Development Management Committee in relation to the proposals to change the arrangements for call-in of applications to the committee. We also consulted with all members of the Council, and we had two responses. One from Councillor Hussain in respect of the call-in procedure that we will be discussing, and one from Councillor Shaw asking for greater clarity on the procedure for dealing with members' complaints against officers, which we have reflected in the protocol for member officer relations. The previous version was really quite vague, and it didn't recognise that there are different procedures to apply when, for instance, you are complaining about one of the Council's statutory officers. So we've clarified that in that protocol. If I turn to the discussion that took place at Development Management Committee when it met on the 28th of September, we have put forward a proposal to change one of the conditions that relates to the delegation of authority to the head of planning to determine certain planning applications. At the moment, the condition says that any member of the council can require an application to be called into committee without giving any reason for doing so. This was discussed previously by Development Management Committee in, I believe it was January 2021. And the committee at that time expressed the view that the requirement for a reason was perfectly acceptable, but they did not accept the proposal that was put forward at that time to limit the ability to call in so that it had to be made by 2 members and seconded by a member of Development Management Committee. So that particular proposal was not implemented, and the committee recorded at that time that it would be considered, that the officers would go away and consider the matter further and bring it back. Well, it was brought back as part of this constitution review, and the proposal that is now on the table is that the ability to call in should be limited to a ward member for the ward in which the application site is located, or a ward member of an immediately adjacent ward. Again, giving valid planning reasons for doing so. There was some discussion at Development Management Committee about whether the ability to call in should remain, as it is at the moment, available to any member of the council. But as I say, the point about giving a valid reason was accepted by the committee. So you are asked, in considering the views of Development Management Committee, to make a decision on that particular point so that an agreed position can be taken forward to full council in November. I think that covers all the main points, Chair. I was asked at the last meeting to make sure that any changes to the documents were brought specifically to the attention of the members of the committee, and that I have done by setting them out in Appendix A to the report.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Hussain?
I think Mark is right. There was a discussion in terms of Development Management Committee, and I was the one that really was saying that the system, in my opinion, for the many years that I've been on the committee, has worked reasonably well in terms of democracy. Democracy is, something we all, this is why we're here this evening, is to give the members the right to be able to ask that certain development must be scrutinized, be that may in their ward or be that may somewhere in the town, if they have a serious concern from the member of public or they are aware of it, and that it could be scrutinized by the Development Management Committee in more detail than if the members of Development Control, but they have to give a reason. Of course, we all agreed on there that we have to give a reason why we want to call in that this matter, because the last thing I or anybody in this council want to overwhelm the committee. We already sit quite late sometimes, and I don't think I am the one that would wish to continue to sit very late with a huge of items. And members have not abused it, and I do not see any valid reason for it to change in it now or for the foreseeable, unless it is a major problem for the committee is overwhelmed, then it should be restricted to ward or neighbouring wards. I think the system is working perfectly well, and I would strongly object to it, that it is changed, and I will oppose it if it was put into the amendment to change the constitution.
Do you wish to come back on that? Any of those points?
I am happy to take the committee's instruction in the matter.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Franks?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with the sentiments expressed by Councillor Hussain, and in particular, in the interests of transparency and openness, the need to have a reason, I don't think that's a problem at all, but for it to have to be a valid planning reason, I think could be an issue. There are situations in which a potential objector, for example, may feel that the problems a development might cause them have been overlooked or underestimated, or, for example, an applicant may consider that the proposal to refuse is based on unreasonable reasons, in which case I can see no reason at all why an application shouldn't be called into committee purely on the basis that both of them should be given an opportunity to speak at the committee and make their views known. That is not a valid planning reason, but for me it is a good democratic reason, and I think it should be allowed.
Okay, any comments or on those points raised? Thank you.
The only comment I would make there is to remind the committee that the best practice recommended by the LGA and the Planning Advisory Service in their guidance note on probity in planning recommends that requests for call-in should be accompanied by a valid planning reason. Although I take Councillor Franks's point, and I repeat, I am here to take the committee's instructions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Hussain? Abid, thank you.
Can't help myself not to comment on it. It is an area, from our previous, when I was a councillor, it was allowed to ward councillors can ask for any item to be bought. And I think that was a fair process. With regard to reasoning, planning, I'm not sure all members would have grasp of the planning expertise to give that reason. I think as a ward councillor with the democratic right should be able to call it in. And I further go bringing my experience as a former councillor, and the changes in the constitution has really undermined the role of the councillor. And if you keep on undermining the role of the councillor, I frankly think many people would not be sitting here.
Okay, are there any comments on that?
Yes, I would just say that the purpose of the protocol that's been included in protocols and conventions is to assist members in identifying what is and what is not a valid planning reason. So there is advice available to members on doing that.
Okay, and I do understand that those protocols are in here as well. Are there any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Right, that's the case then. We do have, obviously, recommendations in front of us, so I'm just trying to work out in my mind what it is that do we need, obviously I'm going to be thinking out loud here, if we need to, we have recommendations put in front of us, do we need to amend those? Is that what you're suggesting, Councillor Hussain? Okay, now I've got that in my head, thank you very much for that. Now what is it that we're proposing? What would you be proposing?
Is that we continue with the system that we have got, where members can call in, provided they give the reasons why they want the matter to be considered by the Development Management Committee and scrutinise, and any members should be able to do that.
Okay, so it's basically sticking with the existing process, in other words, what you're stating.
Thank you.
Okay, so...
Chair, if I may,
Thank you.
not sticking with the existing process, which does not require a reason.
Okay,
I'm putting reason, put a reason.
Yes, Councillor Hussein's amendment was right, if I may say so.
thank you so much for clarifying that. So it is make sure that obviously the existing process, but with the proviso that there must be a valid planning reason. Have I got that correct? Yeah, okay, that's fine, thank you. We got there in the end. Yeah.
Chair, can I just clarify, is that valid reason or valid planning reason?
A valid planning reason, I would have thought.
Reasoning to be given if, for instance, I feel, and members are not expert to give a detailed planning reason, but they can say this will have a major impact in the area of the town centre or the area that I am not a member, but I do feel that it is. Or it could be something else, but if it hasn't got a, planning reasons, then I'm sure that would be rejected by the committee. But a committee should have a right to scrutinise it. It is the Development Management Committee that makes the final decision whether or not a matter should be accept the officer's recommendation or reject it, which they sit there as quasi-judicial.
Okay, so just to clarify that, that it would be not just a planning reason, but it would be any reason, okay, which would then obviously be subject to scrutiny. Is that something that we can... Okay, is that something that we can take away?
If that's the will of the committee, Chair, yes.
So in that case, I'm just going to try and get this right here. We obviously need to make a recommendation. So Councillor Hussein's recommendation, is there somebody another member who can second that? Okay. And I'm then saying, is it unanimously approved? Yep. Okay, cool. Okay, excellent. If that is the case, then I think the second recommendation in this paper goes away or not? Thank you, Councillor Franks. Yeah.
Sorry, I've just got two questions before we actually vote on anything, with your permission. The first one relates to our page numbers 131 and the calling in of an executive decision. Doesn't happen very often. The last time I did it, it's quite a long time ago, and I took my signature to Debbie Janes and promised that I would get the second signature the following day. I was told the law has changed, you only need one signature now. This constitution is asking for two. I just need to understand exactly where we are, please. That's the first question.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Franks,
Yes, Chair. The change in practice from two signatures to one signature was based on legal advice that was subsequently found to be incorrect, and therefore it was restored to two signatures.
Thank you for that explanation. That's
Last two lawyers get three decisions.
The other question is on the protocols. Now, they may well be in here, but I can't find the protocols on scrutiny, the budget, and notifying ward members of things going on in their ward. If they are here, then that's fine, but I can't find them.
okay, be able to come back on that? Thank you, Councillor Franks.
Well, they certainly should be, Chair, because they're definitely in the copy that I've got. I'm not sure what to say, Chair, because they are definitely in there. So whether the copy that Councillor Franks has got is defective, I don't know, but I absolutely know that they're in there.
Okay, I mean, this has got to go to full council anyway, so perhaps to ease things along, if Mark could drop me an email telling me where I can find them, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that might...
Don't need to do it right now.
No, that's fine.
I'll make sure I send you the right copy if you haven't got it, David.
Yeah, perhaps if you're able to circulate that to everyone, just to let everyone know where that is, then I think it might be better. Okay, that's fine. Are there any other questions or comments? Anyone else? Yes, Councillor Skeppelhorn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going on from the fact that we do need this, but it might be better for a shortened, highlighted version, so that we can see, because some of this, apart from the improved language, which, having read some bits of it, actually does read in English rather than legalese, but if we had something that just highlighted clearly those bits that have actually been changed, rather than just have the language sorted out, might be useful for members to wade through and then look at the specific things where changes have been made.
I think we should come back on that.
Appendix A sets out the schedule of changes, Chair.
Thank you. So, Councillor Skeppelhorn, is Appendix A. That has basically all the amendments that have been made. So you should have that. I mean, on my copy, it's on page 11 that it starts from. So that tells you exactly, it's like a summary of the track changes, I suppose, in a way, of which parts have been changed and what with what, and what changes have been made. And as I've said, on my copy, it's page 11. So that's after the report from the officer. No, it's fine. But obviously, again, officers, I'm sure, will note that as well going forward. Okay, is that all right? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Other questions, Councillor Hussain? Comments?
Just a comment to say that I would give the officers the credit that they are trying very hard to bring the thing smaller. And when Diane said she hadn't read it, I think, it's not my favourite document that I would read it from end to end. And the smaller it gets, the better it would be. Particularly, we sit here in the interest of the public, and the public really could do with it, not in the local government language, but the language they use day to day, and not legal jargons, and the simpler the better, so that they can hold us to account, because we have to remember we work for them, and that is something officers and members must never forget.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think the idea is, do you want to come on that?
Well, yes, thank you, Chair. I couldn't agree more with Councillor Hussain on that point. And for members of the public, I think the key documents for them are the introduction and the articles. And we have tried to render those as best we can in plain English. Some of the other stuff doesn't lend itself so easily because we are required to use wording of statutes and that sort of thing. But I would say to anybody who wants an introduction to or a sort of quick idea of what's in the Constitution, look at Section 1 and Section 2A, and that gives you a pretty good overview of it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from anyone else? No? Okay, well, moving back to the recommendations. So I think the first we've dealt with, but I'm just want to double check here that the second one also goes away, because obviously, so I'm sorry, back on page 8, there's the Roman numeral 2 recommendation, which is to commend the revised constitution as amended if necessary to reflect resolution 1 above to full council for approval. But I suppose based on what Councillor Hussain moved, the only revised change I suppose would be to leave the process as it is with the inclusion of making sure that there is a reason. So that will need to obviously go to full council for approval. Is that agreed by members? Is that okay? So we got there in the end.
Thank you, Chair. I'm most obliged to the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and then item 8, we're almost there, gosh, which is basically the Local Government Act 1972, Part VA. And do we have any resolutions under Section 100A, small 4 of the Local Government Act to exclude the public from any item during consideration that is likely to impact members of the public present during those items to be disclosed as exempt information?
No, Chair.
Okay, cool. And just for completeness, basically this is exempt information falling within paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. Okay. And if there isn't anything, which the officers confirm, then I can call this meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your patience with me for my first meeting. Thank you.